start. Go live. All right. It's Tuesday, November 14th, 2023. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight we're reviewing Cobalt Core. So, if you listen to Geek Nights, you know that when we were young, we dabbled in AMD because there was a time when an AMD CPU cost like a fifth of an Intel and was faster.
Well, it was basically, the Pentium 3 came out. I had a Pentium 3. That was the first computer I built, right? Not the first one I owned, but the first one I built was Pentium 3. And then, when that was running its course and was ready for it to be replaced, you looked around at the world and there were Pentium 4s, which are very, very expensive, first of all.
And not that fast.
Well, there was lots of, they were pretty fast, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
But there was, basically, it's like, what were you getting for your money it was not a good price performance ratio, right? And meanwhile, AMD was out there with all these Athlon CPUs that were actually like, hey, they work. They're way cheaper in terms of the performance you get. And pretty much everyone was all in on them.
Yep. It was right when it was the case, because the K6s were like not quite there. The K7s that was like 800 megahertz, 900 megahertz, breaking the gigahertz barrier with that Thunderbird like a little while later.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, okay. And people were, you could get the AMD video cards, but I didn't. I stuck with the NVIDIA ones. But it's like the AMD CPUs. It's like everything worked just normally with them. There wasn't, so that's what we went with in those days.
Yep.
And until the mid 2000s ish, when GeekNights started and they came out with like Core Duos and they, and that sort of thing. That's when we stopped using those.
Yep.
And the one thing is like, did they work? When they worked, right? But it's like
very telling. Every AMD thing I ever had didn't post successfully the first time I tried to turn it on, and then I had to futz with it, and then it worked. Every Intel I've ever had posted the first time,
right,
without exception.
But in my experience, which is not data, we know, it's just anecdotes, right? There were reliability issues in the early 2000s when I was using those AMDs, and the one AMD video card we did have lying around for some strange reason that we put in the earliest
where we couldn't get the S-Video out to work on Linux.
Yeah, it just like didn't work properly, right? But, in the experience that I personally had, every time that I used Intel and NVIDIA things, they worked. There might have been other issues around, no, even my computers are not 100% perfect. There's always some tiny issue, but I have the least issues of anyone I know when it comes to computers and technology.
Yep. And I got to say, my current computer, which is pushing, like, this is a 6th generation Intel, and it's still basically perfect.
Yeah. And so we've entered another era now, where people nerds especially are again going towards AMD and their price performance ratios and even AMD video cards.
Yep.
Right. And it's like, do they work? It's like, clearly they work when they work, right?
Yeah.
But again, anecdotally, not based on data or benchmarks or any sort of anything like that, just anecdotally, the people I know who have AMD equipment have some issues.
Oh,
they have issues. Right?
So a friend of ours just got like a new AMD setup and talking to the other AMD people about like what to get. And there's a Discord thread that is very long of all the fucking problems they had, like trying to get it to work the way they wanted. That was very funny. And simultaneously, I happened to be playing Overwatch the other day. And in the middle of the match, like someone on my team just disconnects. Like, fuck, we're going to lose now. Like, we're screwed. And like we lose the game because we're like a player's out for a minute, but they came back and they're like, sorry, my game crashed. And I'm just like, why do you have an AMD GPU? And this kid responds like, how did you know I have an AMD? And was like kind of mad about it.
It's a 1 out of 2.
Yeah, it's already a 50-50 shot.
It's already a 50-50 of guessing correctly.
But I'd say it's a little better than 50-50 because my anecdata, again, just pure anecdotes, everyone I know who has problems with Overwatch has an AMD, and when I Googled for it, found a bunch of Reddit threads of people having trouble with AMD. Didn't find anything about any GTX whatever video card.
Right. Well, I mean, it could be is conspiracy theory talk, right? But there's some truth to it in that I know for a fact from things I've heard and seen that game developers, game engine makers work closely with AMD and NVIDIA.
Oh, our own friends, when you and I were accused of like talking from experience and not from industry perspective around our favoritism toward NVIDIA. And one of our very like skilled game developer friends directly said, no, they're not wrong. We mostly focus on NVIDIA, and NVIDIA mostly doesn't have problems.
But I'm not talking about like game developers focusing on NVIDIA. I'm talking about actual direct working with business relationships, right? I know for a fact the NVIDIA driver contains lots of code.
Lots of if Call of Duty, do this.
Exactly. It literally has code exactly like that. Like if the game that is being played is this, do this. Like they work that closely with AAA game developers, especially when there's issues, to make sure that their shit works perfectly. I'm sure AMD also does that to some extent, but it could be, right? You know, and this
they're not doing a great job of it if they are.
I'm sure it could be, and this is conspiracy theory talk again, that NVIDIA does that so well, right, to such an extent that it's like anti-competitive behavior to where sort of the fix is in that shit will work with them and not with AMD, not because of hardware inferiority or anything like that, but simply out of just that's how it is. Because you work so closely with me, we made sure our shit worked perfectly and we didn't test it so much with their shit. And that's the problem. It's not actually something AMD did. It's just something.
But also,
as many resources put into that.
Also, an aside, every game developer I know who does like coding and heavy work, regardless of like what the company does and like what relationships they have with the industry, their own gaming PCs, they religiously have NVIDIA and Intel.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Is like, you know, even if, you know, they're not working with NVIDIA or targeting it or thinking about it, right? The vast majority of game makers' computers have NVIDIA boards in them, right?
Yep.
And so the result of that is just going to be that sort of naturally that's what is going to be optimized for, right? Because they're optimizing it for the computer that they're using. And so it's like, if that's the case, it's like, yeah, is AMD actually inferior? They're giving you that better price performance ratio. But in terms of your real world computing and gaming, it's like you're going to pay more for the NVIDIA. You're going to get the stability and the reliability. And now if you're short on money or you're willing or you enjoy messing with your broken computer or breaking your computer on purpose and breaking shit that, you know, what ain't brokes just because you like fixing it and then complaining, even though you're the one who broke it or whatever. You know, you just like to look at numbers and your benchmarks and not actually use your computer to do anything. You just like playing with your computer for no purpose.
Yeah, it's funny.
Okay.
Right around when we
AMD hardware, but if you're someone who is using your computer as a tool to accomplish tasks and to create things and to do things, the highest priority should be your computer works. Who cares if your benchmark number is bigger, right? I need a computer that is on. If it renders the video in 30 seconds and crashes at the 29th second, I'd rather have it render in 2 minutes and not crash.
Yep.
So if you got the money, even after all these years, you know, argue, provide data or whatever, but I'm still anti-AMD based on, you know, pure anecdata.
I mean, my workstation, well, partly because losing an episode of Geek Nights that we've recorded is the worst fucking thing on earth. Like that is that the few times it happened, that was like being punched right in the heart. It was just awful. But this computer is like 8 years old that I'm making Geek Nights on, and when I made it, my only mission was to make it last as long as possible without having to ever open it or do anything to it at all. I wanted it to just work for as long as possible, and I put a lot of time and effort into building a computer that would just work. And here I am in the year 2023 with an i7 6700K, and it is still perfect, other than Adobe Creative Cloud.
Windows 11 doesn't support it.
Windows 11 doesn't support it for no good reason. But also, I encountered my first bottleneck that mattered. That was the CPU, and it is a game you might have heard of called Adobe Lightroom.
Yeah.
The new Lightroom cannot work appropriately.
Lightroom is a little bit slow in my 8700K here, but I think what I'm going to do, I think I've decided, right, is they got the new MacBook M3, and I'm like, all right, this is what, I was planning on computering next year, right? But Apple came and they're like, haha, we're coming at you months early. And I'm like, why you do this, right?
Yep.
But I'm just going to buy, the craziest one. Obviously not the 16-inch one, the smaller one.
Yeah.
Right? But the fastest processor one, and not the most RAM they sell, because they really, and not the most storage, but, enough, right? I'll pay for some ridiculously overpriced.
What was it? I think I just saw an article at WAPO that argued that the way Apple charges for RAM might arguably be illegal.
It should be. It really should be. It's really heinous because, seriously, you can buy 64 gigabytes of RAM on sticks for 100.
And even the argument of, but it's ECC. ECC is not that much more expensive.
I don't think it's ECC at all.
Isn't it anymore?
I don't think it is.
I feel like it was at one point.
It is integrated RAM. It's not, replaceable. It's the same stuff. It's just, it's right next to the chip. So it's not exactly identical. It does justify some markup, but not a 300% markup. And the storage is even more criminal.
Apple stopped using ECC with Intel processors that aren't Xeon, according to the internet.
Yeah. Let me see. I think I wrote it down here. Okay. So yeah. You can buy a Samsung 990 Pro M2 SSD with 4 terabytes of storage for under $300, right? To upgrade, right, an M3 MacBook Pro that just came out, they default to 1 terabyte of storage. If you want to upgrade them from 1 to 4, so you're adding 3 terabytes, right? You're adding 3. You're not buying 4, you're adding 3. They will charge you $1,000. So that's a 300% markup versus just buying M2 drives that are $300 each. It's definitely a criminal markup. But, that is what it is. So what I'm going to attempt, and I guess I can always return it, but I think this will work out because it's still, we talk about Intel. It's like, I've used the Apple M chip at work now for, since the M2 Air came out. And it's like this little thin, tiny wafer thing here is by far the fastest computer in the house. And it's not even remotely close. It doesn't even have fans in it. Right. So it's like you basically, if you can justify it by saying, all right, the upcharge on the storage and the RAM is basically just sort of subsidized by the CPU, which is absolutely insane that they have over there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get that and use that for all my computing biz, right? The iPad Pro I have, I think, is going to not be supported in a year. And I'll just sort of let it fade and I won't replace it because I'll have a MacBook, right? It's the same purpose. And then this computer that's 5-6 years old now, I'm not going to get rid of it. I'm going to use Steam Stream, right? And just keep it over in the corner there with just power and network cable. And then, oh, look, I can play all the games still. There's nothing I can't do because I still have a Windows computer in the corner. I just don't actually need to, use it directly. And if I ever reach a point where I want to play some games and they either don't run on Mac or don't run on this old Windows computer, then I'll get a new Windows computer that's just basically a video card in a box, right? And as small as possible, cram it in a corner, and again, use the Steam Stream situation. And I think this plan is going to work.
I think it's a good plan.
You know what? If the plan doesn't work, I can change it. I could do a new plan in 5 years. I can always, even if I can't return the Mac, I wait too long, I'll be able to sell it, I think, right?
Yeah. And if the plan works, maybe I'll go down a similar road. We'll see. But
it would just be really nice, I think, to go to a con and it's not only do I have a computer that can edit video and photos and everything fully, right, with insane power, but it's literally my primary computer. It's not like the side, like you have a laptop. It's like the side laptop.
But like
right?
before every PAX, I open that laptop and I like download a PDF of the panel and download the video of the pre-roll, like the walk-in stuff, and like synchronize it and do some Windows updates because I really only use the thing at cons and work travel.
It's like, no, this will be my main computer, the primary one that does all the things, right? And this other Windows computer will have Steam on it. And that's it, pretty much, mostly.
So anyway, in some news, when Scott sent me a link to this, and we didn't talk about it because we just skipped shows for a while, all he said was, this is a very Geek Night story.
There's a lot of Geek Night stories. I say that a lot.
You do, but this one is like hyper Geek Nights and crosses almost every intersection of everything we talk about in games.
We got a few of those tonight.
Yep. So this article on Patch is titled Pickleball Brawl. Players hash out gripes, anti-Semitism on Upper East Side courts. And what this boils down to summarize, if you're not aware, there's a sport called pickleball. Now, you might think it's new, but it's not. This is a sport from the 70s. It has come and gone in waves of fad, like right now. Like in the late 80s and early 90s, pickleball was huge, and then it disappeared. And now it's back. So it comes and goes in waves. It's not new. It's been around for a long time. And if I had to describe it, if you don't know what pickleball is, it's basically tennis, but it removes most of the requirements for athleticism and focuses more like it's a different kind. It's the same kind of game, but like you don't have to be super fit to be really good at it.
It's basically in between ping pong and tennis, but slower.
I'd argue ping pong requires way more physical skill than
I'm talking
pickleball.
About size-wise.
Oh, size-wise, yeah. Well, it was originally designed...
It's smaller than a tennis court, but bigger than a ping pong, right?
Well, it was originally designed to be playable on, like, a tennis court, but you play, like, just in part of the tennis court.
Yeah, it's a little bit sort of like playing wiffle ball, but like wiffle tennis, right? Because it's slower.
Like when I was in middle school and high school, it was the kind of game that, like, gym classes would just make all the kids play, and nobody liked it.
Yeah, but I mean, on the one hand, I'm not going to say like, oh, it's as, I guess good by whatever measure, right? It's like, this isn't like if you're the champion of pickleball, that's not like a great accomplishment because being really good at that is not as hard as being good.
It's like the difference between being really good at a console FPS versus being really good at Counter-Strike.
Right. It's like, it's not as difficult, but as a sport for people to play recreationally, it's great that this exists because it gives people who aren't, it's like, would you rather have all the old people sitting around, tennis is too hard for the old people, right? It's like better they play pickleball than nothing. Yeah. Right?
And I got to be clear, like, I don't want to imply that I think pickleball is bad in any way in anything we're about to talk about. Pickleball is fine. It's a game. It's a sport. Go nuts. Nothing wrong with pickleball. However,
just so you know what it is, it's easy tennis.
And I do
Not that
think
I would be any good at it, right? I don't want someone to come and say, "Oh, you said it's easy. Well, let's see you play." It's like, no, I'm terrible. I'm so bad. I can't do ping pong, tennis. Maybe I could do badminton if the other person is.
It's partly funny that the people who are really into it right now are acting like it is like they keep all the stories are. It's the fastest growing sport in America, and while that is technically true. It has been the fastest growing sport in America at multiple points in the past, and then it disappeared. So it comes and goes in waves.
It's got some staying power.
It does, but any game that gets popular, that is competitive, runs into every problem we have talked about on Geek Nights for the last 18 years. So now there is big drama around pickleball. Like, I couldn't even...
Well, the fundamental problem is that unlike other sports, right, tennis-ish sports and pickleball also require space. And it's a lot of space for a very small number of players at a time, right? A whole tennis court, you can have just like 2 people, maybe 4.
Maybe 4.
And that's it, right? It's like that same space could have a basketball court with 10 people playing.
Yep.
Right? That same space could have like a mini soccer field. Right.
Yep.
With a lot of people playing.
Now, meanwhile, the far extreme of that is golf. In terms of
golf. But But the thing is, even though one golf hole can have can still have maybe 8 people, right?
But count the number of acres versus the number of humans actively playing the game at one time.
Right. Now in New York City, space is at a premium. It's not like the suburbs where you can play pickleball no problem. So with the result of that...
Well, the suburbs, you can't play pickleball no problem anymore. I found a bunch of other articles. There's big drama in the suburbs, too, because...
Depends on how crowded the suburbs.
Well, most suburbs have, there's tennis courts around. Like, if you live in suburban America, there are just random tennis courts, like at high schools, in apartment complexes, like next to them in parks, and they're usually just free, and you kind of just play on them. And it's not really a big deal. But the drama in most of these suburbs over the last year is that the tennis courts that were moderately used but weren't a crunch are suddenly completely filled with pickleball people. So one, the tennis players can't play tennis because people are playing pickleball on the tennis courts. And two, the pickleball people, there's way more of them, and they're all mad because no one's organizing the line or enforcing the rules they're making up over how long anyone gets to play in this free place.
Yeah, well, so that's the thing. In New York City, right, when we have a space constraint, they devised a system of permits for tennis.
Yeah,
right?
you need a tennis permit in New York City if you want to play on any municipal tennis court.
Or you have a membership at the racket club, but...
You either buy a private tennis court or you pay $100 to get a year-long...
If you want to play tennis on a public tennis court, you need a permit in a New York City park, right?
Yep.
And there's a reason that they had that system of permits and, people watching the courts was because... that sport has a lot of space dedicated to a few people, and when demand exceeds the acreage available, they need to, do some rationing. Right?
It's the same problem that is solved in arcades by people putting quarters on the rim of the DDR machine.
Exactly. So, here we have a situation though with pickleball is somebody set up some pickleball courts, right, in a public place. And basically with their own private equipment, nonetheless, they're just letting the public use it just out of the generousness of their own heart, right? This guy comes every day, sets up the nets, right? And at the end of the day, he takes them home and he lets everyone play. But this is not official in any way, shape, or form, right? There's no permitting system. It's on public land. And it's no one really has a problem with the land being used that way, right? It's a public park. Most people want to play pickleball versus the other things that were being done in that park.
But the pickleball people are fighting with the other pickleball people over how pickleball is going to go down.
Exactly. There's no official system. It's a public park. Everyone has a right to be there, but you have spaces that are only limited to a few people at a time, and there's no official rationing system or anything in place whatsoever.
Now, arcades have the same problem. That system, in quotes, where people would put their token on the DDR machine to take their turn, no cop is enforcing that. You could just go up and play, and unless...
But sometimes people just ignore that system, and there's fights in the arcade.
Exactly. Because the same reason why if a convention, a NerdCon says you can't line up for the autograph thing until 4 hours before, then what happens? A bunch of people don't line up. They form a mob where the line's going to happen.
Right. If you're playing Street Fighter in the arcade and there's a general rule of loser walks, that's the socially accepted rule, but it's not an enforced rule. If I lose and I just put a quarter in and keep playing, what are you going to do? Punch me? Right? You'll be the one to go to jail. You can't stop me.
Yeah, you got to call the cops. Cops don't give a shit, nor have you broken any law or rule.
Right. It's what's the owner of the arcade going to do? They don't give a fuck. I put my quarter in. It's my play. Right? I'm standing here. You can't move me. Right? It's I wouldn't recommend behaving in the way I just described. I would recommend following the social convention. But that's the thing, right? It's not a real rule the way that, if you don't have the tennis permit in New York City, the police will come right, and make you stop playing tennis eventually, right?
So arcade people can sort out the DDR machine, but the pickleball people don't seem to be able to sort out pickleball.
No, and it's even worse. Not only are they fighting over who plays, but there is the same thing we've talked about in competitive versus casual, right? Where some of the pickleball players are for serious, and some of them are just doop, 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 doop.
I'm going to read a quote from the article because it's so perfect. Quote, "This debate has led to a number of flashpoints over the summer, including players refusing to leave courts when their time was up, and a scene where Albert removed other nets during the game to set up his own for his morning routine." He interrupted someone's game because he was doing his own thing. But the thing that people seem to be the most mad about, other than the space and the time, is, quote, people are mad that sometimes there are hour-long waits to play games that aren't worth it if they happen to get paired with less skilled players. And the skilled players are arguing they should be entitled to a special skilled court time for high-skill only people so they don't have to play with the noobs. Why do you think there's matchmaking in every fucking video game?
Right. So my suggestion there is, if you are really that skilled, and pickleball is such an important part of your life, and you want to play a lot of pickleball, and you value it that much.
One, join a pickleball club, join a team, join a league.
And you care about it that much, and you really are that good. Pay to join the racket club with money, and you can play pickleball all fucking day, nonstop, against other people who are also caring about it so much.
Yeah, the YMCA has a free ladder for every racket sport you can imagine.
Right.
And the old people are more than thrilled.
Lots of them. There are lots of racket clubs all around the city for every weird ass sport. You can play squash. You can play racquetball. You can play pickleball. You can play tennis. Anything that I don't know if you can play high live, but basically everything with balls and nets and walls, volleyball, water volleyball. It's like,
but it also leads to something else. This matchmaking system that they're complaining about is also not official or anything. Like when I was a kid, if you wanted to play tennis, you didn't just go to a tennis court and like assume someone would randomly like be assigned to play with you. You went with someone and you two were going to play tennis against each other.
Yep. But so what's happening here is that people are showing up to this public park knowing that there's a big pickleball community, and they're showing up alone, right? And like, you know, a team will leave a game, right? And then you'll come in with like whoever else got there and has been waiting the longest, right? Is who you're going to be with, right? You're not just, you know, otherwise it's like I'll show up in the morning early, I'll be in line, and then when my friends get there, I'll be like, you can't, it doesn't work that way, right? So,
and now the casual players are accusing the people who care about the game more of being basically Nazis, and then the people who are better at the game are accusing the less skilled players of hogging court time.
A bunch of adults acting like children. What else is new?
So if pickleball continues to be popular, it isn't just the fourth wave of it becoming a fad and coming and going. I feel like New York City is going to say, all right, y'all fucked up. It's $100 a year. There's going to be municipal pickleball courts, and we're going to regulate it like we do tennis. The tennis people don't get into fistfights. So yeah, this is why there's matchmaking in competitive FPSs. So what's your news? This Pokemon thing?
Yeah, so...
Another very GeekNights story?
Another very GeekNights story. So there were some Pokemon championships. We're talking about the video game here, right? And it's basically, you know, we know Pokemon. You're listening to this, you know Pokemon. There's two components to being good at Pokemon. Number one is you have to put together a team of 6 Pokemon that are trained, right? And have very high stats, right? And how do you do that? Grinding. That's how you get
IVs and EVs and ruining your life.
Feeding them the right foods, breeding them, right? You have to spend hours and hours and hours training the Pokemon to get them to be the strongest. And once you've done that, it's like now you have a chance to enter the second part of Pokemon, which is the actual battle. Choose which Pokemon you're going to send out first, and choose which move you're going to use, and a sort of rock, paper, scissors battle that also involves Pokemon knowledge. And it's actually kind of an okay-ish kind of game.
It's fun.
Right?
I like Pokemon Battle as a concept.
Right, but it's like, you know, Pokemon Battle is not so bad a game, really. It's not too far off from, like, you know, competitive card game.
But
really.
EV and IV training is just poison for the soul.
Training is a competition that tests who invested the most time, right? So if you are to hold a Pokemon competition and you are to say that people must legitimately train all their Pokemon, what you're saying is that nobody has a chance of winning this competition. You can enter, go right ahead, but you can only have a chance of winning if you have already spent X hours of your life training the Pokemon, right? If you are not willing to sacrifice that many hours of your life, you can enter, but you can't win this thing unless you have insane...
Imagine if you couldn't play tennis against anyone or pickleball unless you stood in your house for 40 hours a week for a year, just bouncing the ball on your racket. And then you can play tennis.
Yeah, the hours you spend on I think in competitions in general, right? If you're talking about a fair competition where there are prizes at stake, where it's actually meaningful, nobody should get an advantage that is directly linked to time invested, right? We don't give veteran sports athletes like free points when the game starts, right? We don't.
Old Gummy Joe has been playing hockey for 40 years. His team gets an extra point when the game starts.
Yeah, it's like we don't do that, right? We don't let old Gummy Joe use an illegal stick. You know, we don't let him have upgraded equipments, right? If there's prizes on the line, then it should be a fair competition. And the only thing that should matter are people's skills and not just time invested. So everyone knows, open secret, 90+% of Pokemon competitive players cheat. They use software to craft and create their ideal Pokemon team. There might not be an ideal Pokemon team, but their ideal team, so that they don't have to grind and sacrifice hours of their life. They could instead spend the time in their life practicing the battle part, the actual game part, and be better at that, the actual skill game.
And I'll say right now, pure direct value judgment, absolutely. I think that's fine. If the Pokemon you bring to the Pokemon tournament is legitimately possible without cheating at the Pokemon game. Like, you can't bring an unknown with infinite stats. Like, that's a different kind of problem.
These people are not making Pokemon that could not have been trained. They're not like, haha, I've got a Pikachu that has all 1,000 stats. It's like, no, it has the max stats a Pikachu could have if you spent a whole year training it to perfection.
And you got lucky and got the right Pikachu with the right hidden stats and whatevers.
Yes, it's possible. It's illegal. If you had trained it, it would be legal, right? There's nothing breaking the rules of the game about it other than they've arbitrarily decided that you have to actually legitimately train
I think
Pokemon.
The people who get mad about this are the same people who get mad if someone else in an MMO bought gold or levels instead of grinded them.
Well, I think that what's happening here, people who don't have, I'm going to make a value judgment, I'm going to make a human judgment. Those people are people who don't have a lot of skill, right?
I'd also make that same value judgment.
They don't value they don't value themselves being good at something. And when they play a game like, say, a JRPG, those games make those people feel good because anyone, regardless of skills, can invest time. Everyone has time. Right? Even the worst, most disgusting person, the saddest person, and the best person all have time. The same amount of it, right? Relatively. So anyone can invest time, and a game that rewards you simply for investing time makes you feel like a winner, regardless of whether you're actually good or bad.
We've done so many panels on this. The difference between training versus playing, or time versus effort.
Right. And so those people who are feeling like a winner because of time investment, and they see somebody else winning more or beating them who hasn't done time investment but is maybe just actually good at a thing, they don't like that, right? Because now their illusion that they're a winner, that has been the lie that they're holding in front of themselves is now vanished, right? It's like, oh, I'm not actually good at a thing, I just invested a lot of time. And it's like they need to make the thing that's making the lie vanish go away to keep the illusion in place. And so, right, like I said, almost all the Pokemon players, I think the players basically agree with us. They're okay. The players don't care. They're okay with people just cheating to get the Pokemon as long as they're not cheaty Pokemon, right? They just didn't spend their life grinding. But Nintendo, operating the tournaments, is not okay with that. So a few people got caught, I guess, somehow, having their Pokemon were not legitimately grinded and trained by hand slowly and methodically. And so those people got disqualified, even though the vast majority of players also, I guess you should just disqualify 90% of the field. I don't know. But
there's no way that many human beings grinded the amount of hours it would take to get the lucky special Dragonite.
Yep, with the perfect stats. Right. And then you have to do that. You get to do that for 6 Pokemon, not just for 1, 6, the whole team. You don't want to walk in with like 5 perfect Pokemon and 1 weak one, right? They got to all have the best possible stats. So, yeah, it's a real shame because I think that, if Nintendo would just let you, or in fact, make a legitimate way to do this for competitive purposes, right? I think it would actually. I don't think that Pokemon.
I think it would make the Pokemon competitive
Pokemon's
scene
already
better.
the most popular, most money-making intellectual property.
Oh yeah,
of
I think
all
it would just
time.
make the scene better and remove this source of drama.
Yep. But they're not doing that. So for the time being, it's like you either have to grind, hope you don't get caught, or don't play competitive Pokemon. Those are your three choices.
My advice to you, hack and just don't get caught, because you're not cheating in my perspective, and I doubt you'll get caught. And if you get caught...
Only a few people got caught when almost everyone was cheating, so go ahead.
All right, I'll skip that third news because we went on a while.
Okay.
But anyway, things of the day. So this is partly an example. This isn't going to fool anyone. It's obviously an AI generated content. It's labeled as such. It's intended to be such. It's basically just a demonstration.
I knew it was before I even saw the label.
Yep, absolutely. But the YouTube title video is called AI Tom Scott Talks About Sneed. And basically someone wrote, if you don't know Tom Scott, he's one of those popular YouTubers, but unlike a lot of them, he's like his content's pretty good and he doesn't seem like he's a bad person. Like,
as far as I could tell, I didn't even know what his name was, but it's just like, oh, that's that guy who always appears on YouTube, but looks like he's on one of those TV cable channels, right? It's like
I think he makes perfectly good
kind of production,
good content. It's a little bit of mix of like teaching you something plus some investigative journalism. Like there's a lot going on. He's a good guy.
It looks like someone's doing a report for the BBC or something.
Yeah,
but it's just this guy who's on YouTube.
But he has a very particular style, for one. And two, he has made so many hours of content that training an AI model to mimic his voice is basically a trivial exercise. So this YouTube channel, just had an AI model that will mimic his voice, wrote a script that is exactly the kind of thing he would talk about a made-up thing, which happens to be one of the least noticed jokes in the first 11 years of The Simpsons, Sneed's Feed and Seed. And it sounds exactly like Tom Scott to my ears. Like, I know it's fake. I know it's not him, but it's basically perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you got? Oh, you've got the best possible PAX Omegathon ever.
Yeah, so I'm sure most people here know about Rockem Sockem Robots, which is a toy. It's also a game. It's a plastic toy with a little plastic boxing ring, and both players have basically two little joysticks with buttons on them.
Yep.
And you can use them to move your there's a plastic robot, like physical plastic robot attached to them, and you can move the robot a little bit, and you push the buttons to punch. And you're trying to punch the other robot in the head and not get punched in. You're not get your robot punched in the head. And so as soon as their head pops up out of their body, that's a win, and you can play to however many points you want. It's basically like Street Fighter, but physical in the real world, but no people have to get hurt. Sort of like BattleBots, really.
Yeah. But also, it doesn't actually work that well. Like
no motors. Yeah.
Like Rockem Sockem Robots kind of doesn't work. And I remember
it's really cheap. You could make a nice one that worked and was fair, but they're so imprecisely manufactured and poorly manufactured that who wins and loses often ends up being to just like, oh yeah, this particular Rockem Sockem Robot's like the mechanism. Red's head is a little loose and pops up kind of easy, and Blue's is really stiff. So
well, we asked that one year.
Most of the time,
the head of the Omegathon finale at PAX did an AMA, and you asked him, what about Rockem Sockem Robots? And he literally was like, look, yeah, we thought it was a good idea too. We tried, we tested, it doesn't fucking work. It's terrible.
Yep. It is terrible. So what if you could make something like that not terrible? It's basically puppet fight, right? Like I've got a marionette, you got a marionette, and they both have, they punch and kick each other, and there's some mechanism for determining which marionette wins, right? That's basically what it is, right? And that's actually kind of cool because it's real. Like I said, it's Street Fighter. Only the controls are, marionette controls as opposed to, a gamepad or a joystick. Here we have some genius people who have made a certain kind of puppet, I would guess. It's definitely puppet category, that has a balloon for a head and an actual sword. And so these two identical puppets, you control one of them, and whoever's head gets popped by a sword first wins. As long as the swords are equally sharp, and they're manufactured identically. This seems fair to me.
It looks so fun.
Much more advanced and awesome looking than Rockem Sockem Robots. It's equally safe. It's probably the safest way to have a real sword fight. It seems like a lot of fun. I really want to play, but I think it's a one-off so far. Who knows if this will become a... I don't think you could have children play this because they'd hurt themselves with the swords.
Yeah, but and two adults at, say, a Penny Arcade Expo Megathon finale with a big bespoke version of that on stage, that would be legendary.
Yeah, I think this is just freaking awesome. I hope that they get a patent for this and start selling it.
I'd buy it.
Yeah.
I mean, I almost bought
Clask.
Clask I almost bought, but I didn't. I would buy this.
I mean, even if you don't use this a lot, this is so... It's just the fact.
Oh, yeah, you bust this out at a party once, and it pays for itself, no matter how much it costs.
I know, right? I'd pay a few hundred. Anyway.
In the meta moment, the GeekNights Book Club book, the last of the Murderbot Diaries, or at least the next Murderbot Diary, I bet there'll be more, came out today.
Oh, did it really?
Today was
to look it up.
Today was the day I had on my calendar that said it comes out. I did not confirm.
I'm confirming. You just keep talking.
Yep. So the Murderbot Diaries, the whole set of them, all the Murderbots are the GeekNights Book Club. Since, unless I am wrong, and Scott's about to correct me, the last one or the most recent one just came out. Read that one. Read all of them. They're very short reads. And in a few weeks, we're going to do the episode on the Collected Murderbot Diaries.
System Collapse, Book 7 of 7. The Murderbot Diaries is on sale.
Yes.
Right.
I really like these books. I got a lot to say about them. I think it'll be a good book club episode. So I highly recommend you read a bunch of them because I really want to talk about it in the context of assuming you've read these books. Murderbot is a delightful
14th,
character.
It was released today. I guess I know what I'm doing later. All right.
I'm
still reading the Iliad though.
Oh yeah, the Iliad. I feel like we might have to do a pause and do a special book club just on that book, and
we don't need to do an episode on it just because I'm reading it.
I think we should do an episode on it. I feel like I'll have a lot to say.
Yeah. We're gonna go to PAX Unplugged.
Yep, we're gonna be at PAX Unplugged doing 2 events. We are teaching the basics of trick taking, including how to be good at them, or at least reasonably good at them. We're not pros. We're not the best trick taking players in the world, but I'm gonna say we're pretty good at trick-taking games, and if you follow our advice, you'll beat most of your friends at most trick-taking games.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing a panel, 59 minutes of us talking about nothing but worker placement. And the more sub-research I've done to put these slides together, yeah, we could do a 4-hour panel on worker placement and not run out of stuff to say.
I mean, that's a pretty big one, right?
It is a pretty big one. We picked the easiest one that we have the most opinions about first because that makes it easy for us to make a panel.
Mm-hmm.
If we talk about rondels, that's going to be a harder one to put together, I think.
Yep.
So, yeah, we'll see you at PAX Unplugged. We're going to be there. It's going to be a good time. If you're there, say hi, play some games. And I feel like we should get right into Cobalt Core. So
when we were at PAX West, one of the games we saw in the expo hall that I saw briefly I didn't play it. I just saw, maybe I played it for like 2 seconds, but I just saw it briefly and I could tell right away. I'm like, that's the game.
Yep.
I could see right from here that's one of the games. I got to take a photo. I got to write it down. I got to add it to my Steam wish list.
Yep. Walking around the expo hall, I took a photo with my phone because that's how I remind myself this is something to check into a few months after the con. And Scott and I both had the same opinion. We saw it and we said, wow, that's just FTL crossed with Slay the Spire. And those are both great, so I assume this is going to be great.
Yeah, there are many games that are trying to be Slay the Spire.
Yep.
Just like there's many games that are trying to be Vampire Survivors.
Yep.
Right? And most of them, are okay to, different varying levels of quality.
But kind of like how there's a lot of deck builders.
I've played a handful.
Like there's a lot of deck builders out there, like tabletop ones, but Dominion kind of is just better than 99% of them.
Right.
Same thing. Slay the Spire is just better than 99% of its clones.
But Cobalt Core, having played this one, I was like, okay, let's see how it, compares to the others in this sort of category of solo rogue deck buildy kind of deals. And I gotta say, this is the first one that might actually be better than Slay the Spire.
I would agree. It is added because Slay the Spire, as good as it is, like I still play it, like just kind of often.
I haven't played it in years.
Well, because I'm trying to hit Ascension 20 with every character, and I'm getting close.
Okay.
But Slay the Spire does have some fairly narrow boundaries of what is possible, and you're kind of always just looking for the broken infinite lucky combo. But it's within pretty hard bounds of what cards can do. Now, on the other side, FTL, another game, FTL's main flaw, if I have to ascribe to it a primary flaw, is that no matter how good you are at it, you are so deeply beholden to randomly getting the items and weapons you want that you can't apply that much like planning to FTL. This game has solved both of those problems. In terms of comparing it to Slay the Spire, it added a few more degrees of freedom to what is possible, and that opens up the fucking game in a way you wouldn't believe. And compared to FTL, it gets rid of the things that just fuck you randomly in FTL and gives you all the good parts of FTL.
Right. So the way this game works is obviously you have a deck of cards, right?
Yep.
And on your turn, you have some, 3 energy, right? And you play 3 energy worth of cards. All the rest of the cards get discarded, and then you draw a new hand. And, and what you're doing is those cards, what they're interacting with, in Slay the Spire, you just have a character who is attacking and defending, right, against enemies. Here, you have a spaceship, and the spaceship has pieces, right, that are each in a column.
Yep.
And one of those, depending on the ship you have, but the normal ship you're going to start with has a cannon in one of those columns.
Yep.
So when you shoot, you're only doing damage in that column, and the enemy is opposite you. So you want to play a card that attacks when your cannon is in the same column as a piece of the enemy's ship, that you can hit them.
Yep, and you can play a card that attacks for some amount of damage. You can play a card.
You can also play cards that put up shields, which just block incoming
Well, put up
damage.
persistent shields until you filled them, or temporary shields. You can play cards that give you the ability to move your ship arbitrarily. So you're banking this resource now of not just shields and damage and life, but I have 8 moves of my ship, so I might move my ship a bunch to the right or a bunch to the left in this infinite sea of movement, and the enemy ship also moves. You can play cards that just move you. You can play cards that shoot missiles. You can play cards that drop drones and things of various kinds.
Yep. It's like there's quite a lot of things that you can do. It's like, wow, there's really a lot of different systems going on here that are all interacting with each other in like ways that make sense. And it's like, it doesn't actually get complicated.
No.
It's like you think it's like they added a lot of systems without it becoming a mess, right? It's like, wow. It's like usually when people add that many systems, it's like, it becomes a big, kind of a bag of nonsense, right?
Yep.
But it's like, no, it all kind of works together. And it's actually an interesting challenge. You're like, okay, these are the cards I have. What order can I play them in to do the most damage to the enemy and have the least damage to myself? And you repeat that over and over and over again until you win or lose.
And I guess, so it has surpassed some of the limitations of Slay the Spire. Like, it's just better in terms of the options you have available and degrees of freedom. It's better than FTL in that it gets rid of the parts of FTL that actually are not fun, but scratches that same itch. And then it's also got this dimension of cute characters and funny dialogue, and there is a plot.
There is a plot. So the way it works is you start with these 3 characters, right? And each character has a set of starting cards that go in your deck.
Yep.
Right? And then you unlock more characters. And whenever you start a run, you choose which 3 characters you're going to bring with you. Now, even though there's only, I think, 8 characters, if you unlock all of them, and that's not a spoiler because there's like 8 squares on the left. It shows you that. You just don't know who they all are. You can combine any 3. So it's like, unlike Slay the Spire, where there's basically like 3 characters.
Well,
I don't know,
4.
did they add any more?
Yeah, there's 4.
Okay.
Well, you haven't played with the 4th one? You should check out that 4th character.
One?
The monk. With their
I think I stopped
stances.
playing like shortly when that came out. Yeah. Anyway, there's like, if you choose 3 of 8, how many possible combinations are there?
Oh God, a lot actually.
A lot, yeah. So it's like there's a lot of different options for your starting deck, and each character, their starting cards have like a completely different system. One character has like pretty basic, a lot of shield cards with a few attack cards. Another character has a lot of attack cards and a lot of immediate movement. Another character has a lot of move how you want to move kind of cards, right? Another character has a lot of, missiles and obstacles to play with the middle system, right? That's going, automatic turrets and meteors and all those sorts of, and so on and so forth. Each character has a completely different, like, system of way their cards work, almost like a different color in Magic the Gathering, right? And then you go on a run with, like, this completely, and you can't actually customize your deck too much. Like, it's really easy to add garbage cards to your deck.
Yeah.
But it's actually kind of difficult to like remove cards.
Yep.
And it's pretty rare to get upgraded cards.
So the cards end up like a lot of good tabletop war games. They give you like the boundaries of what are the possibilities for this turn? Like, what are my options? So imagine you're the captain of the ship and you're like, engineering, what do you got for me? And they're like, well, I can launch some drones or we can fire the cannon, but I can't do both.
Yep. And so all that customization is going on, and then you can unlock different ships, right? And the different ships are arranged differently and have different abilities. My favorite one, I guess, is the one where you have 2 cannons and you can freely alternate between the 2 cannons. And I made it all the way to the final boss and I lost because I was all in on that. And I didn't have enough defense.
Yeah.
Right? And even though I was doing a ton of damage, it wasn't enough damage to put away a final.
I never lost a run until I switched to hard difficulty and I lost my first run.
No, I lost once or twice on normal and once or twice on hard. But I think one of the ones I lost was the very first one. I didn't understand what the fuck was going on.
I won my first one, but it was kind of lucky, honestly, because I misunderstood some mechanics, but it didn't matter because I got really lucky.
I've only ever died to, other than the first run, I've only died to the final boss, and then I've basically only died in like to really hard guys.
So to zoom in on
the hardest difficulty, so who knows what
I haven't touched that yet. But I guess to give some examples, because you could probably do a whole panel talking about the deep design of this game. But to zoom in on a few specific examples to show you where this has surpassed the games that it is based on, and it's clearly based on them. There is no universe where the designers of this game did not sit down and say, we're going to cross FTL and Slay the Spire.
No, without Slay the Spire, Cobalt Core does not exist. Right?
Yep. Without FTL, I don't know if this game exists.
Who knows? But
so example 1, in Slay the Spire.
I think without FTL, Slay the Spire might not exist.
I think that's true as well.
Yeah.
So here's a very specific example. In Slay the Spire, there's cards, and they all have a unique thing. You can, for various ways over the course of the game, upgrade a card, and this game has the same mechanic. But Slay the Spire, it's just, here's the card, here is the upgraded, slightly better version of that card. This game, every card, you can choose what aspect of it to upgrade. So, multi-shot, a card that costs 1 energy and just does 2 attacks. Well, you could make it cheaper, or you can make it do more damage. Pick your poison. That
Every
level of
card
tuning.
Has an A upgrade and a B upgrade.
That level of choosing your tuning removes one of the big frustrations of Slay the Spire of you just might not get what you want. Like, you can decide the direction you want to take your deck with more granularity in this game, and that is more satisfying to the player.
Yep.
Example.
Another funny example. There's this guy you can meet randomly.
Dracula?
He'll give you Dracula's great, but there's a guy who will give you for free a completely worthless card. Like, one of the examples is a card that, like, I think it costs 1 and it costs 1 or 0, but it basically does 3 attacks for 0 damage each.
Yeah.
So it just goes like pew pew pew, nothing, right? And he also has a card that's like move right, move left, move right, move left. And it's like you just end up back where you started. It doesn't do anything.
Now think back. Did we both have that power once where you play a card that every time you move, you shoot? Suddenly that card's really useful.
Right. It's like these completely garbage cards, but if you get the perfect combo with them, they're insane. Like, there are some abilities that are like, add X damage to every attack. It's like, wait, So suddenly 3 0 strength attacks is now 3 7th strength attacks. 21 damage. Eat it, right?
Right.
Which is a lot in this game. Like 3 damage is a lot in this game. Each battle is generally like, it takes a little while to wear out the enemy. You're not getting a lot of one-hit kills.
And you're making a lot of honestly challenging tactical decisions. Like, do I eat some damage or like wear down my shields, but just go apeshit on that cockpit because I already cracked the cockpit. It's weak.
Yeah. I think the luckiest I ever got was there's a guy you can visit who will rearrange the pieces of your ship randomly. And I always let him do it because
I always let him do it.
He makes your hull stronger by 2. And I'm like, yeah, all right, I'll deal with the rearrangement. Give me the 2 hull, which is HP. He put my cannon all the way on the right. And I was like, oh my God, I just hung out with like only my cannon hitting the enemy, and the rest of my ship way to the left where the enemy couldn't hit it. And I just kept moving left so that they couldn't hit me unless they hit me in the cannon, right? But it's like only my cannon was just poking the right side of their ship, right? It was I won that one so easily with
right
that setup.
So here's another example now of where this has surpassed FTL. FTL, you get money, like scrap, over the course of the game. And it's kind of like fiddly random amounts. So you'll have like some amount of this currency. And then you'll encounter shops and you can buy things with the currency. But 90% of the time, you do not have enough currency to buy anything interesting that you want to buy. Or you're very limited in what you can buy. In this game, if you come to a shop, the options always boil down to get a thing. There's no currency. It's just get a thing, get a better thing, but pay some extra penalty for it, or do a different thing. Like every option is equal but different, but you always get to avail the option. You never get to a shop and, sorry, you only have 187 scrap and the thing you want to buy costs 200 and everything that costs under 187 sucks. Fuck you, that FTL had.
Right.
Every space is good.
If something has a cost and it's not free, it's always something you have. Like, I'll take what? All right, you can have this. I'll take one of your cards. You can. You can have this. I'm gonna take some of your hull off your ship.
Oh, hey,
you can have this, but you have to add a bunch of garbage cards to your deck, and then I'll let you have it.
Do you want a free artifact? Do you want your choice of 4 artifacts, but I'm gonna do some damage to you, or do you just want to heal yourself?
Right. It's like there's always there's no separate currency. Every option is always possible.
Yep. I love that. That is a tabletop design pattern as opposed to a video game design pattern. I'm sick of fiddly currencies unless it's an 18xx game.
Yeah, you're making meaningful and tough decisions at every stop along the way.
I'd say every decision you make in this game is meaningful.
Yeah. Or at least, well,
unless, like, you have a shitty deck because you're stupid and then, like, you draw all bad cards. Like, what are you going to do? But that's one turn in a round.
You can get unlucky. So the last thing is the game has a plot, and the way the plot is revealed is that the 3 characters that you've chosen to go on your ship with you, right, are chatting and interacting with all the people you meet along the way at all the different stops, including the enemies that you fight. And then when you beat one run, because it's a roguelike, you choose one of the 3 characters in your ship to regain one of their memories. Because basically it's that old trope of a time loop and everyone's lost all their memory.
Yep.
And so you can only choose one of the 3 characters that's on your ship to regain one of their memories. And so in order to regain all the characters' memories, well, I said there's 8 characters if you unlock them all, times 3. So you have to beat the game 24 times. Right? And you have to beat the game with each character in your ship 3 times each, right? You can't ignore one of the characters. You got to go all of them, basically.
Now, thankfully, all the characters are fun and useful and interesting.
So far, at least. I
don't have every character.
Yeah, no, I think I have 6 out of 8. Anyway. But it's like you have to do all that, and then I don't know what happens after that. There might be more content beyond that, but the story is being revealed as I play, and that gives it a lot of replay value, but it doesn't have the sort of insane replay value. I guess in some sense, right, you might say that Slay the Spire has more replay value, because like Rim said, to get every character to 20 takes a lot.
Yep.
Right?
But also, to get every character to 20, like, to be clear, no matter how skilled you are at that game, it is a random game, and
but I'm saying it's mostly like doing the same kind of thing. Like
yeah, like I'm
really...
playing the poison lady, and what am I doing? I'm trying to do the poison thing, and I'm hoping I get the cards that let me do the poison
just
thing.
Optimizing numbers, it's still like the same game. It's like here, it's like, yeah, you just have to beat the game 24-ish times maybe, but you're, and then there's additional difficulty levels, I guess, but you're getting to this, more complete end, but it's like there's more that drives you to keep playing than just beat the game with more difficult.
That is true. Like Slay the Spire, if I don't get the cards I want by the second floor, I'll just restart.
But I'm
Advance Wars
driving
style.
you to even launch the game and play it at all, right?
Yep.
It's like if you don't care about optimizing numbers, if you just like beat Slay the Spire with one character or like each character once, and you don't care about like getting the high score or anything like that, then like why would you beat it on a higher ascension? What's the incentive for you, right? Whereas here, there's an incentive, the story, the characters, the more dramatically different setups and ships and things. There's more that makes you want to open and launch the game and try again than just, can I play the same game again with bigger numbers this time?
But also, Slay the Spire, choosing what cards to add to your deck is the only decision that matters other than the map if you know how to play the game and are good at it. Like, you're not going to fuck up playing one of your playing a round of a fight in Slay the Spire if you're even reasonably good at Slay the Spire. This game, no matter what you're doing and where you are in the game, every round of combat is a reasonably interesting decision, with rare exceptions where you get a really bad draw occasionally.
Or a really good draw.
Or a really good draw. Like, yes, fire the photonic cannon. Of course I'm firing the photonic cannon.
Oh, I can play this card and win this battle. I'll play it. Next battle. Let's go.
And honestly,
if you enjoy a roguelike game, a deck building game, a Slay the Spire-ish game, a single player game, a game with cute pixelated space animals and ships. You should. What's the full price of the game?
I don't even know. $10. Like, it's not expensive.
I'm checking right. It's on Steam and
it's also on the Switch. I would advise, if you have a Switch, get it on the Switch, because it has the same UX as Slay the Spire. It's really fast and easy to play on the Switch, and I think you'll play it more if you can carry it with you.
I would say that you should get it on Steam, because we don't know when the Switch eShop will close, and if you buy it on Steam, you will have this game forever.
Well, I do own Slay the Spire on both the Switch and Steam, so...
if you really like spending money to buy a game 2 times, sure. Go knock yourself out. I will always prioritize getting a game. If a game's on Steam, I'm getting it on Steam, because Steam is 20 plus years old, and no Nintendo eShop has lasted more than like 10 years. So, right?
I'd say there's a 5% chance the current iteration of the eShop is the one that'll just persist console to console forever.
There does seem to be some hints that it will continue, but there are no guarantees, and history has not...
Hey, I said 5%, to be clear.
Yeah. There is a sale on Cobalt Core on Steam right now. It is $18 instead of $20. I would pay $20, no problem. But
I would have paid $40 for this game unquestioningly. Now that I know how fun it is.
$2, you have 18 hours from the time of this recording to go on Steam and buy a copy of Cobalt Core from developer Rocket Rat Games, who has also made what other games? Steam had an error and could not tell me what other games that they have made. Let me try. Nope, it still can't tell me. Let's see what the publisher. Probably also an error.
Brace Yourself, I think?
Yes, Brace Yourself Games. What else have they published?
Crypt of the Necrodancer.
That's a good one. Yep, it's just not loading. All right, well, whatever. I give this game on Steam, I give it a extremely positive rating on Steam.
I'd say that it's great. Like, this is where you can't compare a game like this to like Breath of the Wild. Like, but for what this is,
obviously.
This is 10 out of 10 for what it is. If you like this kind of thing, 10 out of 10, no notes.